Welcome back. You're watching The Globe on the SABC News Channel on Reconciliation Day here in South Africa. And to talk to us a little bit about his thoughts on this day, we're now joined via Zoom by anti-apartheid activist and author Reverend Frank Chikane. Reverend, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much, and good evening to those who are watching.
All right, before we get into what we think this day should be about, perhaps your own personal take. When you woke up this morning, what came to mind for you on Reconciliation Day?
Well, there are too many things that were in my mind. I mean, the state of the nation. I mean, the crisis in which we are, the way in which we have become more fragmented in the last few years than before, the lack of social cohesion, and the language that people are using now, which is really putting apart people rather than bring people together. And those were the issues for me that concern me. And maybe it's because I'm involved in an operation that says we must do everything possible to turn around this country and make it what it should be.
You know, the early 90s were a very interesting time, and I remember the Rugby World Cup final, and there was something about that day and that time. People had a certain hope, and perhaps we weren't really paying attention too much to things that were bubbling under at the time. And I just wonder, from that moment to now, what perhaps has held us back? Because it was an important first step.
Yeah, I mean, we started very well, I must say, because I was in government and I was traveling around the world. I mean, there were two perspectives about us. That South Africa is giving the world hope, particularly Africans. But there were other Africans who were warning us and saying, today you might look like you are the pointer to the future, but soon you're going to be like us. And I never took seriously the second opinion. But actually, what has happened is that we worked very hard. You'll remember that by 2008, we were growing at 5.6% of the economy, and we were aiming at 6%. It was clear that without 6%, you can't solve the problem of poverty in this country. And things turned around. There was an international financial crisis. There was also a crisis within the ruling party, the governing party. And those two things held together for the next 5 years, and by 2015, we were nosediving, basically. And the country is worse than it was. And I think people were aware, but were not taking it seriously. At least I can say, I prepared a 33-page document and took it to the Tule House by 2015. And as you know, it's a public document now, and it predicted all these happenings that are happening at the present moment. We were aware of it, and I think we should have stopped it right from the beginning, but we didn't.
What could we have done back then? What conversations should have happened so that we'd be so much further today?
No, I think it will be better if people went through that 33-page document.
Right,
Basically, what I said is that the ANC as a governing party must change its trajectory. Because if it doesn't change, the country is going to be hurt. And by 2015, the signals were there. I mean, state capture, looting of state resources, impacting negatively on the capacity of the state, because you needed people who can manage to be able to loot. and then we got state-owned entities being looted like it has never happened before. And so our books can't balance because we have destroyed the base. We needed to have stopped it at that point, but some people thought some of us were mad or crazy and taking risks that didn't make sense. But I am convinced that the more you become, you reach a crisis point in terms of the economy, the more social cohesion gets affected, the issues of reconciliation gets affected.
I'm going to use an analogy. Social media, often we think that that's the universe, and there are all these voices that make so much noise, and yet there are many voices that we never get to hear because they're too scared to speak up, and so we never get a real sense of what people are feeling and thinking. I wonder if we didn't go through the same thing where we didn't really hear all the voices. And I'm thinking maybe even white people back then, what were their concerns? Because we now are dealing with people saying that they just didn't come to the party. What might have been the reason?
Well, I mean, there might be all sorts of possibilities. I in particular, and I must say I'm happy I put it in writing 2015, I in particular indicated clearly I live amongst the people. My congregation, it's in Soweto. I'm a vice president of the SACC. We have access to the whole country on the ground, and I travel. And when you meet white people in a plane, they complain like they are totally paralyzed, and it were whites before, but by 2015, it were black people who were complaining about the crisis we are facing. But we all look like we're going through a nightmare. You know, when you go through a nightmare, you see the danger, you try to scream, the voice doesn't come out, you see somebody and you wave, the hand doesn't, you try to run, the feet can't carry you. And that's what South Africa went through. And I said it in 2015. I said, we must wake up and get out of this nightmare, take a stand and stop the corrupt who were capturing the state and destroying the country. And that soon we'll have a failed state in front of us. And indeed, we nearly reach that stage. And as I'm saying, when that happens, poor people remember 94 did not change their economic conditions. Poor people remember that others are basking in the wealth of this country whilst they are sleeping without food. And that creates more tensions. The white community on the other side in the main, those who own the economy, did not themselves come to the party. They only come when their interests are threatened. But otherwise, they are relaxed. And I think we need to join hands together and together use all the resources we have in this country to turn the politics around and turn the economy around.
Again, I go back to 94 and then we'll come back to our present day. There was a lot of tension even then. We put whites to one side between black people and political parties. And I just wonder if 27, 28 years later, we're still dealing now with a need for reconciliation just amongst black people, given the factions that have played out and the politics that's played out.
Yeah, I mean, in 94, we were dealing with lots of baggage from the past. You know, you remember the violence in KwaZulu-Natal, the tensions between the liberation movements themselves, and even the violence that happened between UDF, AZAPO. You remember all those experiences. Black on black violence, which was generated by the system to make sure we fight each other. we walked over those challenges. And I remember I was in government for the first 2 years. We used to have emergency staff every December. You remember there used to be massacres even into the second year of democracy during December. But we won that battle and normalized the situation. And then, of course, we had whites, business who had withdrawn from the economy. When I went into government 1996, yes, 1996, we started a process to dialogue with business, and we brought them on into the party. I think we were making great progress. You'll remember we used to have meetings with the Afrikaner business people, Afrikaner leaders to resolve these issues. And we achieved it. I mean, even the tensions between the differences between the liberation movements, I mean, people ended up being in parliament, even those who boycotted it at the beginning. And I think we did reach a stage where we stabilized the country. Something went wrong, and I must say, history will be able to reflect critically about it, where people teamed up with criminal elements within the business sector and the underworld to destroy this country. I mean, you just have to look at how the money that was taken by the Guptas was moved out of the country into foreign lands. I mean, it's all criminal networks that were involved in it. And so we are really dealing with a much more complex issue. Even these killings about local government elections. I mean, people kill each other for being a councillor. But then you realize, no, that's not the issue. The issue is that there is a criminal element on the ground which has interest in the resources of the state and will kill those who will not deliver what they want and promote those they want. And so now we end up electing criminals to go and run the government. And I think that's where the crisis is. I mean, it has been in KwaZulu-Natal. It has happened, I mean, the last local government election in 2016, about 20 people who were standing for elections died. And this country didn't raise an alarm. And now, even in Tshwane, we began to have people dying in Tshwane. And if you scratch the surface, you find criminal elements in it. And I think that's where some of us formed the Defend Our Democracy campaign. To say we must mobilize the people of South Africa as the last line of defense.
We've run out of time, but I can't leave this without us leaving people with some hope of some kind. And I just wonder how we put it all together. How do we, yes, we're in a really dark place. A lot of things need to be overcome. Do we start with the economy and then start with the stuff of the soul? Or do we start with the stuff of the soul and then fix the economy? What do we do?
We do both. Because you can't solve the stuff of the soul when people are hungry.
Right.
You do both at the same time. We have done it before. I don't think we should feel hopeless. We dealt with the apartheid system, and it was the worst thing that could happen. People were dying around us, and we still faced the guns and won. South Africa has done it before. We can do it now. And the only thing is that the people of South Africa must come out of the nightmare, wake up, and look at the reality and say to the criminal elements, you're not going to determine our future here. You can kill a number of us, but you will not kill everybody. And that's how we defeated apartheid. We need to stand up, fix the politics, fix the economy. And we need all hands on deck, black and white together. That's what we require. And I think the people of South Africa are ready for it, in my view. We have had too much pain, and we can't allow it to continue.
Reverend Frank Chikane, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
All right, there we go. Some pretty sobering words there from Reverend Frank Chikane on Reconciliation Day, that we all have to come together. Wake up, actually, is the word that he used. Yeah, things to think about.